Welcome to today's full council meeting, which is being held in the council chamber of Portsmouth Guildhall. Thank you for coming today, members. I'd firstly like to welcome the Very Reverend Canon Dr. Anthony Kane, Dean of Portsmouth, who will say a short prayer. Dean.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Konnichiwa to our guests from Japan. Let us pray. God of life and peace, following the motion on a ceasefire in Gaza recorded in today's minutes, we continue to pray for a resolution of the conflict there, for the release of hostages, the reconstruction and renewal of Gaza, and for a diplomatic process capable of delivering lasting peace. We remember also other places of conflict, including Ukraine, and all in this city with links and connections to situations of suffering. We give thanks for our international links, and especially today for the presence of Mayor Kamada and other guests from Maizuru. Help us to affirm in our words and actions that every person possesses unique worth and dignity throughout the world and in this city. And as we consider, amongst other things, committee appointments and budget forecasts, grant us wisdom, mutual respect and goodwill, and a commitment to the common good of all the people of Portsmouth. In this council meeting and in all we do and say, may heaven's light be our guide. Amen.
Please be seated, members. Thank you very much, Dean. You are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but we understand if you would like to leave. Members, for the attention of those members of the public wishing to record proceedings, the Council's rules prohibit the filming, photographing or recording of members of the public, including those making deputations. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble by Queen Victoria's statue in the Guildhall Square. Just to remind members wishing to speak, you simply press the talk button on the unit in front of you and I will activate your microphone when I call you to speak. I will also turn off your microphone when you have finished speaking. Moving to agenda item 1, declarations of interest. Members, if you have any disclosable pecuniary interests or personal and prejudicial interests to declare in relation to the items on the agenda before us, please can you indicate? Councillor George Madgwick.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have a personal and prejudicial interest in item number 7 and will not be in the chamber for that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Strudwick.
Same as what he said.
Thank you, Councillor Strudwick. Agenda item, Councillor Heaney, just in time.
Well, I was understood that because I'm a person who has a green waste collection and the service is coming under PCC, I had to declare an interest, but I'm now told I don't have to declare an interest, so I'm not quite sure where I stand, but I've done it anyway. All right.
Thanks for that, Graham. No one else? Agenda item 2, minutes of the council meeting held on the 12th of December 2023. Is it proposed by Councillor Steve Pitt and seconded by Councillor Simon Bosher that the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 12th of December 2003, previously circulated, can be confirmed as a correct record? Councillor Pitt.
So proposed, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Bosher.
So seconded, Lord Mayor.
Are the minutes agreed? Is it proposed by Councillor Steve Pitt and seconded by Councillor Simon Bosher that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 12th of December 2023, previously circulated, be confirmed as a correct record? Councillor Pitt.
So proposed, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Bosher.
So seconded, Lord Mayor.
Are those minutes agreed? Thank you, members. Apologies for absence and communications. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Yinka Adeniran. Any other apologies for absence today? Councillor Bosher.
Lord Mayor, Councillor Hannah Brent has an appointment and will be joining us a little bit later.
Thank you, Councillor Bosher. No one else? Wunderbar. Under my communications today, I would like to welcome Akitsu Komoda, Mayor of Maizuru, and Kazuyuki Ueba, Chairman of Maizuru Council, our sister city in Japan, to this meeting, and would like to firstly invite Mayor Komoda and then Chairman Ueba to speak today. Komoda-san.
Konnichiwa. Good afternoon. Good Honourable member of the City Council. Nice to meet you.
ご紹介いただきました舞鶴市長の鴨田昭津でございます。
My name is Akitsu Kamoda. I'm the mayor of the Maizuru City.
本日は上場和幸舞鶴市議会議長とともに伝統あるポーツマス市議会の場にお招きをいただきまして誠にありがとうございます。
We couldn't thank you more that you have invited me, myself and the leader of the council here in this traditional city council meeting.
私自身初めてのポーツマス市の訪問であり、舞鶴市とポーツマス市の姉妹都市提携25周年の節目にポーツマス市へお招きをいただいて実現できて大変光栄でございます。
It's a huge honor for me to be able to visit this city, this traditional city, on the very memorable year of the 25th anniversary of our city, sister city affiliations. And actually, this is my very first visit to the Portsmouth city.
ポーツマス市滞在中はトム・コールズ名誉市長をはじめポーツマス市の関係者の皆様に温かいおもてなしとお配りをお心遣いをいただき充実した時を過ごすことができました。
It's been a wonderful three days, actually, thanks to the warm welcome by the Lord Mayor, as well as the member of the City Council, and their meticulous care. It's been wonderful.
さて25周年を迎える姉妹都市提携から交流の積み重ねは1988年5月15日にこの場所で両市の市長と議長が姉妹都市提言書に調印したことから始まりました。
Our sister city affiliation began in the year 1998 on the 15th of May. So it's been 25 years since then, and it was both mayors from the both cities and the leaders of the council, the four people signed the agreement to become sister cities.
姉妹都市提携の翌年から始まった青少年英語研修につきましてはコロナ禍の影響によりやむなく休止をしておりましたが舞鶴市では2024年を人的交流の本格再開の年と位置づけておりましてこの度のポーツマス市訪問を契機として青少年の英語研修事業の再開さらにはポーツマス市からも多くの市民の皆様に舞鶴へお越しいただき両市の相互交流が実現できる日を期待したいと思います。
As you may be aware, there's this wonderful program of Maizuru youth visiting staying in the city of Portsmouth for a few weeks to learn English. Unfortunately, because of the COVID, this wonderful program is currently being suspended. But for us, the next fiscal year 2024, we have positioned that year to be the resumption of the mutual exchange of human resource or human exchanges. So therefore, I would like to see our next generation of youngsters visiting the Portsmouth city again, as well as welcoming some citizens from Portsmouth visiting the city of Maizuru.
結びになりますがポーツマス市のますますのご発展と本日ご臨席の皆様のご健勝ご活躍をお祈り申し上げまして私のご挨拶とさせていただきます。Thank you.
I'd like to conclude my remarks by wishing the further prosperity of the city as well as the good health and the personal prosperity of all the councillors present today. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Kazuki Ueba. 舞鶴市議会議長の上場です。
My name is Kazuyuki Ueba. I'm the leader of the Maizuru City Council.
この度はポーツマス市にご招待いただきまして本当にありがとうございます。
Thank you very much for your kind invitation to the city of Portsmouth.
いただいたバッジも全員がつけてまいりました。
So we are given a badge, a city badge, and everybody is wearing the badge now.
皆さんとしてきた交流は本当に大きな私たちの財産です。
It's a huge asset that we have been able to have these exchanges with the people and although the people from the city and people, the staff from the city of Portsmouth.
これからもしっかりと発展できるように舞鶴市議会も頑張ってまいります。
So we would like to emulate the prosperity that Portsmouth City is enjoying, so that we will be making efforts so that we can follow your success.
最後に皆さんのご幸福と、そして、ますますの活躍をお祈りするとともにですね、ぜひ機会を作っていただいて、舞鶴市へ来ていただけることを願っています。
And I'd like to conclude by again wishing each member of the council good health and prosperity, as well as wishing the possibility of some of you visiting Maizuru City in the future, so that you can see what we have to offer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
ありがとうございます。I believe Councillor Steve Pitt, the Leader of the Council, would like to make a response. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Mayor Komoda and Leader Ueba, it's been an absolute pleasure to host you here in our great city of Portsmouth for the last few days, as well as other members of your delegation. We know that you've had a very, very busy time and a very full schedule, so I'm sure that you'll need a rest after visiting Portsmouth. Okay. I had the pleasure of meeting the delegation at Southsea Library on Sunday, where we exchanged books, a set brought to us from Missouri, and we've sent a similar set of Portsmouth-based stories back to Missouri, so that we can share and understand each other's culture and our stories. As part of this, I mentioned that origami is not my strong point. One of the books featured origami, and quick as a flash, the Mayor created a beautiful crane for me there and then on the spot, which I've got on my desk at home, the crane being the symbol of the city of Missouri. So on this auspicious occasion, marking the 25th anniversary of our great friendship and sister city agreement between the two cities, members, would you please rise and show your appreciation for the importance of this relationship in the usual way.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. I can second all of that. It's been wonderful having our lovely friends from Maizuru here. Arigato. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, members. Me first. Moving on. The new corporate parenting strategy was agreed by Cabinet last week, and the pledge board is in the council chamber over there by the Lady Mayoress and Heather, to my right. Well modelled. Members have also been provided with a laminated copy of the pledge as a reminder of our responsibilities as a corporate parent. Councillor Horton, as the relevant Cabinet member, would you like to say a few words about the strategy? Councillor Horton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, for allowing this extra item on today's agenda. Whilst the corporate parenting strategy does not need to come to full council, this concerns all of us, so it seems appropriate to say a few words about the Cabinet meeting last week. The business of the day was to adopt the strategy, a strategy that's being co-produced between council staff, partner agencies, carers, and most importantly, the children we care for and care experienced children in the city. It's been a long process and has culminated in, let's be honest, a strategy, a document, and the pledge cards that we have in front of us. Who better to present that to Cabinet last week than the leads of the Children and Care Council and care experience groups, alongside some of our in-house carers. Adam Murphy, who's the participation officer, also shared feedback from a number of children and young people unable to attend, and the power of those voices made a strategy on some bits of paper really come to life. And some of the words that were in those extra citations included a desire to be treated with independence. They wanted loyalty. They wanted openness. They wanted stability. They wanted trust. But most important, they wanted love. As I said last week at the Cabinet meeting, there is nothing more important in my role than getting this right. This is a document and it's a pledge and it's the end of a long process, but the impact of that document equates to the quality of life and the opportunities for hundreds of children in our care in this city. There are a few parents in this room, some newer than others, and some of us who aren't parents. But I'm confident that I speak for all when I said that we want the same opportunities for the children we care for as we would want for our own children. During the process of writing the strategy, I had the privilege of getting to know some of the children and the foster carers, and I can honestly say that when they were standing there last week and speaking, they felt like family. I will make it my business to think of ideas and ways that we as members can support each other to be the best corporate parents. And please feel free to send ideas if you can think of any and we can incorporate it. And so thank you, Lord Mayor, for allowing us to add this extra item, but I thought it was really important that it comes to this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horton. Moving on to agenda item 4, deputations. No deputation requests have been received for this meeting. Agenda item 5, appointments. The first request is that Council agree that Councillor Darren Sanders is appointed to the vacant Liberal Democrat seat on the Planning Committee. Is that agreed, members? The second is to ask for nominations for the position of Planning Committee Vice Chair. Please note that nominees must be a current member of the Planning Committee. Do I have any nominations? Gerald.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Could I nominate Councillor Darren Sanders, who's been sensible enough, foolish enough, or courageous enough to put himself forward to sit on the Planning Committee, and I'm happy to use his expertise as a former consultant within the planning system to be able to add to our meetings at the Planning Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon Jackson. Does Councillor Sanders have a seconder?
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? No? Groovy. Do we need to vote on it? All in favour? You can vote for yourself, Darren. I believe that is passed, members. Thank you. Press ganged. King Shillington. Finally, one position change for noting, which has been included on the green sheets. Councillor Graham Heaney has replaced Councillor Asghar Shah as the Labour Group spokesperson for the resources portfolio. Is that noted, members? Agenda item 6, urgent business. I have not been notified of any urgent business for this meeting. Now, moving on to agenda item 7. To receive the recommendation of the Cabinet held on the 6th of February 2024, as previously circulated. I now propose to call the minutes. If you wish to either question or oppose the minutes, please indicate by standing and calling out either question or object once I've called the minute. Can I also remind members that any item to which no objection is made will be deemed to have been approved. I call minute 19, council tax premiums on second homes and empty properties. Thanks. As there is an objection to Cabinet Minute 19, I now call for a proposer and seconder to the recommendation. Councillor Pitt.
Propose, Lord Mayor.
And a seconder?
Second, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak on it?
No, not really, Lord Mayor. I think that the details are within the paper. I'm intrigued to discover why the opposition to the minutes happened.
Next in my script, I've got, thank you. Are there any amendments to be proposed, seconded and circulated? No? The matter is now before members for debate, starting with Councillor Bosher, who objected to the recommendation. Councillor Bosher.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. It is a curio of standing orders that we have to oppose something, even though we are supportive of it. But this is one of those reports that the significant impact both on our communities and actually on the city finances, I didn't feel should just be nodded through without so much as a comment in that respect. And I appreciate that we've got more pressing business later on this afternoon. But certainly from my perspective, we've probably all got examples in our communities of houses that have stood empty and perhaps blighting our communities. And if this is in some short way a means of being able to bring back, certainly in my ward, some family homes that will be much needed for families to actually move into and purchase rather than stand there and be empty, and also generate additional income to the City Council, I personally think it's a good thing that we're in this particular place. I hope that the values that we're actually looking at, curiously, are talking about the empty properties we've actually got at this moment in time, and won't necessarily reflect where we are in the 1st of April next year. But if it brings back into play certainly much needed city finances, then I agree that it should be in a good place to be. But as I said, from a point of view of standing orders, curiously, I have to object to something to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Bosher. Just before we continue, Councillor Williams, do you have any interest to declare?
None at all, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I have no one else indicating to speak, so I'll ask the proposer to sum up. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Some good points made there by Councillor Bosher. That's why the policy is coming forward. We are a city with limited land, and group leaders earlier on, we were all sharing anecdotes of particular properties that we know around the city that have stood empty for far too long. So by introducing this policy, we're also able to bring much needed additional income into the council, but ensure that more people are able to secure homes locally. Then it's a win on both counts.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. We will now go to the vote. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstained? Thank you, members. The recommendations are approved. Moving on to item 8, to receive and consider the budget, council tax and medium-term budget forecast recommendations of the Cabinet from its meeting held on the 6th of February 2024. Members, as previously circulated and recirculated in the chambers today within the green sheets, are the recommendations of the Cabinet. The budget report was also previously circulated with the agenda for this meeting. Further to the letter sent in respect of the procedure to dealing with the budget debate, I will deal with the Cabinet's recommendation by calling out the minute number, pausing for any member objections. Cabinet Minute 20, Portsmouth City Council Budget and Council Tax 24-25 and Medium Term Budget Forecast 2025-26 to 27-28. As objections have been raised, I shall shortly invite the Leader of the Council to move his Cabinet's recommendations on the budget and council tax. Before I do, just to remind members that the 6-minute speaking limit does not apply to group leaders on budget items. Leader, I now call on you to move and speak to the Cabinet's recommendations. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. As I rise to present before you my first budget as Leader of the Council, I do so with a great deal of trepidation as to what the future holds for local government in this country. Councils of all political colours have been making a very strong case to government that without significant additional funding, the very nature of local government as we know it is in peril. The LGA identified the need for an additional £4 billion this coming year, not to increase the delivery of local services, but to maintain current levels and provide for the relentless increase in need for demand-led services such as adults and children's services and temporary accommodation. The government's response was to provide £600 million, of which £500 million was to be spread across councils which provide additional resources for social care. For Portsmouth, this meant around £1.8 million in additional funding against a budget pressure of £14.5 million, only 7.9 of which was to be covered by additional grants and the 2% precept on council tax bills for local residents. The current system is failing. It is failing across the country. Locally, Conservative-led Hampshire County Council is flagging £132 million in deficit going forwards, and our colleagues in Labour-led Southampton are having to turn off the streetlights at night to try and balance the budget. Lord Mayor, these things should not happen. In the many letters I receive from ministers, and there are many, it is absolutely clear that they are deaf. Deaf to councils up and down the country who have responded time and time again to cuts in their budgets, but are sending a very clear message that they can do so no more. Whoever wins the next general election will have to have a plan to respond to these calls, or local government as we know it will end. 1 in 5 councils have been warning that they will need to consider filing a Section 114 notice during the next financial year. It's worth reflecting for a moment on what Section 114 actually means. Commissioners are sent in by the government to run the council. Every single non-statutory spend is put on hold and decisions are made away from the political leadership on what gets spent. In practice, this means that events programmes vanish, museums close, libraries close, early help and intervention work in social care, often the very activities which reduce the acute demand which costs the most, ceases. Green initiatives would end. Support for cultural organisations would cease. Now, currently, Portsmouth is not in that place. We've invested wisely as a council over the years, delivered on budget savings measures rather than relying on the extensive use of reserves to avoid making the tough decisions, and this has served us well. However, since the austerity period began, Portsmouth's lost over £100 million a year in funding, and so every year making the required savings without cutting services gets harder as demand-led service costs continue to increase. It is worth noting, for example, that a complex placement in the private sector for a single young person in our corporate care prior to the pandemic cost around £7,000 per week. There are examples of such cases now costing £47,000 per week. Yes, per week. That's £2.4 million per year for one child. It shouldn't need any explanation that 1 or 2 more young people requiring this level of care would significantly unbalance our budget. That is how fragile council finances have become. It will be an imperative for the next government to impose a cap on the cost of care provision to end this seller's market and prioritise the young person, not the companies raking in the cash. All of this pressure on social care will inevitably grow as the disastrous reorganisation from CCGs to ICBs continues to bite. Portsmouth is at risk of losing all of the money that supports the discharge to assess unit, which helps get patients out of hospital and prepares them to able to successfully go home. At the same time, they failed to confirm funding for the Wellbeing Collective, who worked to keep people out of hospital, which has now collapsed, and they've failed to confirm the full core funding for the Hive. This is around £2 million swiped from Portsmouth due to an insular and dysfunctional body focused in on themselves and obliterating the effective partnership that Portsmouth built with the CCG. I would like to thank Councillor Winnington for his efforts in partnership with his colleagues on the Isle of Wight, at the county and in Southampton, that's all political colours represented there, Lord Mayor, to try to force the ICB to the table to have a rational discussion. So far, they appear to be deaf to these pleas. So Portsmouth is, for now, a stable council with a balanced structural budget for the next 3 years. This is based on requiring £1 million a year in savings in each of the next 3 years, with a possible variance of up to 1.67 million in addition per year. Therefore, it is vital that we consider the potential need for up to £2.67 million in savings when we make the important decision around raising council tax. We absolutely understand the pressures on household budgets. We recognise that many families have had to abandon their own discretionary spends, the day out as a family, the trip to the cinema, or even just a takeaway meal But for many, the choices are even harder, with families having to choose between heating and eating. These are tough times, and the very last thing we want to do is increase council tax to add to that burden. However, it is imperative that everyone understands that raising council tax to fill some of the gap being left in our finances is actually the policy of this government. Indeed, when the government talks about increasing core spending for councils, they are factoring into their figures a 2.99% increase in council tax and for upper tier authorities a 2% increase in the social care precept. They are passing the buck onto local taxpayers to shield themselves from taking the flak. It is totally disingenuous and cynical, and I would urge the next government to be more open and transparent about the way they choose to fund local government. In this situation, for an upper tier council, one responsible for social care, to not increase council tax and the social care precept by the maximum amount would be utterly reckless. The ability to deliver current services and, more importantly, meet the ever-increasing demands on social services and temporary accommodation budgets would be seriously compromised. To instead eat significantly into our reserves would equally undermine our financial stability and lead us down the paths that others have already trodden. We cannot allow that to happen here. We must protect our finances. If the Conservatives want a low tax and low spend country, then they need to fix what's broken first, before pursuing ideology at the expense of reality. Cutting taxes whilst forcing cuts to the very services that our residents rely on is not good government. It's bad government. It's irresponsible government. At this point, I want to highlight another issue which is facing all councils. Government has failed to make any commitment at all to continue in the Household Support Fund. In Portsmouth, this means that £3.8 million less is available to help some of the most vulnerable families in our city. Some of the just about managing families that back in 2016 the Tory government said it cared about. Well, no more it seems. The money to support food outreach, food banks, pantries and larders, advice and support, access to the holiday activity and food programme, grants to struggling households, all gone. This administration is pledged to doing all it can to continue to support the food providers, to continue to provide advice and support, to give young people vital access to holiday food, and to enable those who can't even afford to go bankrupt to be able to do so. But it won't be enough. We urge the government to think again and bring forward a clear plan to deliver this support in the spring budget. And Lord Mayor, it's really important that once again I stress this is not us saying this just as a Liberal Democrat administration. These calls are going out from the LGA, from councils of all colours across the country. To not do so will push thousands of families over the edge. It will increase homelessness. It will cause more families to break up under the strain. It will leave the just about managings as families in crisis. For all of these reasons, I commend the revenue budget saving proposals and the recommended increases in council tax and the social care precept to members. Lord Mayor, in doing so, I also note the work of Cabinet colleagues and officers across the Council, particularly Chris Ward and the finance team, who have worked so hard to ensure that through innovation, income generation and efficiencies, we have been able to preserve all of our current service provision for local residents this year. I now move to talk about the Cabinet's recommendations for the utilisation of capital resources for the next municipal year. There are three key aspects to decision-making around deploying our capital funding. Firstly, can we use capital to drive further efficiencies and reduce pressure on revenue budgets? Secondly, how do we ensure we are maintaining public assets? And thirdly, how do we utilise funding to achieve regeneration and keep Portsmouth moving forwards? In education, we are proposing to create additional secondary school places to meet forecast demand and plan for the future, particularly in post-16 SEM provision. We'll be investing £380,000 towards early years provision. This £380,000 was provided by the government, and with it they expect Portsmouth to deliver up to an additional 1,000 nursery places by September next year, £38 per place. Does it sound like that's enough? This is yet another example of government making an announcement without thinking through the implications of the policy, making a soundbite for a speech, throw a bit of cash at it and pass the buck on to local authorities to deliver on their promise. It's yet another scandal, Lord Mayor. Does it remind you of anything? Oh yes, the border control post scam, where they realised they hadn't allocated enough funding, so they just split what they had around the ports, giving them 69% of the necessary amount and telling them the rest of it was their problem. They then scrapped the scheme, leaving Portsmouth holding the bag for nearly £7 million, which we are now in debt for and having to find a way to repay. Oh, then they changed their minds again and again. This isn't a government, Lord Mayor, it's the Philosopher's Football match from Monty Python. Because we are making the right decisions and protecting our finances, we are able to yet again invest significantly in adding to our efforts to green our city. This money will be used to apply for match funding from external sources to grow the pot and enable even more to be delivered. The funding allocated last year is currently out to bid, seeking to leverage enough additional investment to plant another 4,500 trees as part of our commitment to double Portsmouth's tree canopy, alongside other schemes to plant fruiting hedges, shrubs and other plants to help protect and enhance our biodiversity, as we pledged at full council. Castle Road was a success story from the changes to road uses during the pandemic. Ward councillors and officers have worked alongside the community, both residents and businesses, to devise a scheme that will significantly enhance the public realm and enable further community-led phases to come forward and bid for external funding. This co-design with community is an excellent model and could be a template for future opportunities elsewhere in the city. It has been a number of years since there was any significant improvement in our outside sports courts. This budget introduces what is envisaged as a rolling programme of renewal over several years and will, importantly, see investment into creating a new netball hub at Mountbatten to increase provision for women and girls sport, something we discussed earlier in this municipal year. This programme is linked to a similar one for our city's play areas. Around 13 years ago, there was a significant amount of money from government allocated to play park renewal across the city, which means that many of our play parks are in need of investment again now. This programme will include investment at Hillsey Lido to complement the multi-million-pound regeneration of the Lido itself, Water's Edge Park in Paulsgrove Ward, the popular junior and toddler units at Canoe Lake, the play park at Baffins, and new renewal of the equipment at Bransbury Park, rather than just relocate the existing when the leisure centre is built. Over the next 5 years, a rolling programme will see investment into renewals in every ward in the city. In tandem, we will see a significant investment across our adventure playgrounds, making improvements to all 6 of them to protect this important youth provision in our city. Worth remembering that many local authorities have completely scrapped their youth services. Here in Portsmouth, ours thrive, and we have plans to increase provision further after securing over £1 million of youth investment funding for our city. I would like to pay tribute to the officers who have helped deliver the stunning new football complex at King George V. It is now opening and will welcome community clubs from across the city, especially youth football teams, alongside a great community offer with cafe and meeting rooms. Lord Mayor, I recall being on my feet in this chamber, facing a barrage of criticism for not simply refurbishing the old burnt-out pavilion. I now hope that everyone can see why I stood my ground. Where other local authorities, including nearby Hampshire, are slashing funding to museums, here we are proposing to invest. Long overdue investment into both Cumberland House Museum and Portsmouth Museum and Art Gallery will improve the visitor experience and help our excellent new head of museums to drive further income from donations to help future-proof our offer. This is essential in a city such as Portsmouth, whose visitor economy is so intrinsic to our long-term success. As the council-owned International Port attracts more and more cruise visitors who are increasingly choosing to spend their time ashore right here in the city instead of boarding coaches to Stonehenge or London. The partnership work by the tourism team, the attractions in the city, shaping Portsmouth, is paying dividends. It is important that we support that work. We are proposing to invest in a replacement for the big screen. The asset, won as part of the Cultural Olympiad over a decade ago, prior to London 2012, is at end of life, and is so important in helping to deliver physical and mental health and public safety messaging, including the You Are Not Alone and End Domestic Violence campaigns, as well as promoting our libraries, events, university graduation and major events in the city such as Victorious and the European Kiteboarding Championships. It generates a small annual surplus which can be grown with a brand new screen. The Bransby Park Leisure Centre is almost ready to submit for planning permission, and after a turbulent development period impacted by the rising cost of raw materials and overall inflation, driven by issues related to the now infamous mini-budget of autumn 2022, the war in Ukraine, and more recently by the attacks on shipping in the Red Sea, this final request of funding will deliver cost certainty for the project, and if planning is granted, allow for works to begin early this autumn. Similar schemes, and indeed many other local authority-led development schemes, have been abandoned or significantly de-scoped across the country, but this administration remains committed to fulfilling a promise to replace the obsolete Eastney Pool and ensuring that the southeast of the city has a quality swimming offer for local residents. In a fairly recent development, the emergence of an excellent offer to more than replace the Wimbledon Park Sports Centre, also at the end of its economic life, has removed the need for a sports hall at Bransbury and would be in an accessible location in the south of the city, currently not served by a significant public sports offer. The school we are working with have asked us not to talk publicly about the location until they have secured agreement internally, but we expect that to be successful and to be able to announce and celebrate this new opportunity by late spring. As I mentioned earlier in this speech, the cost of temporary accommodation is spiking across the country. Last year, I co-signed a letter with 119 other councils calling on the government to address this issue with additional funding. District and borough councils in particular are at breaking point, with some reporting they're now spending more than 50% of their budgets on TA provision. In Portsmouth, the TA budget is £1.3 million overspent this year, and pressure continues to rise. Failed tenancies brought on by the cost of living crisis and the government's mess around as it decides how it will treat those who have secured refugee status are heightening the crisis. We are committed to helping everyone we possibly can and see providing someone with a roof over their head as a basic human right. In order to ensure that we are providing the very best offer we can to those who find themselves homeless, we're proposing to relocate the Homeless Day Service to a new dedicated location. We also want to work even harder to prevent homelessness and are proposing a new prevention hub to work with those at risk of their tenancies failing as early as possible and ensure that they feel supported at what is always an appallingly difficult time in their lives. Combined, this investment in preventing homelessness and supporting those who are homeless will mean over £500,000 in additional resources for the excellent teams at PCC. A cross-party working group has been considering the future delivery of council services and whether our existing civic offices are fit for purpose. The facts are clear that in order to provide good value for our residents, the do-nothing option simply doesn't work, and that is why we are proposing to fund the work necessary to demonstrate that downsizing is essential and give full and proper consideration to what that should look like, whether through refurbishing the existing building or relocating to a new, significantly smaller site. Councillors of all parties have been very clear that our overarching priorities must be to save the public money, provide facilities which are of high quality for our staff, and perhaps most importantly, deliver an environmentally sustainable outcome which helps us to meet our climate change obligations. I look forward to continuing to work with colleagues across the Chamber to ensure these outcomes are met. Community safety remains understandably a high priority for our residents, and that's why we're not only proposing to add more deployable cameras, including at the city's dog kennels, but to ensure that we are addressing areas of the city which are currently dark and uninviting at night. A rolling programme will commence with £40,000 of funding allocated for the next financial year. And Lord Mayor, if any members have not seen the new lighting in the trees in what was previously the darker corner of Canoe Lake, I'd encourage them to go down there and see just what a transformation that's provided, along with the new festoon lighting, which is simply stunning. This budget proposes a very large investment in the transport portfolio, utilising 2 years' worth of LTP4 monies to enable important schemes to be delivered promptly and with funding certainty. There is money for the tertiary roads network following the end of contributions from the PFI, and a parallel scheme will start to address the issues which sit outside the PFI on concrete-based roads across the city. It is important that we promote cycling and micro-transport options. Our road users, as we do that, our road users are our roads are not only fit for motorised vehicles, but other road users too. Something that, unfortunately, was not considered anywhere near enough 20-odd years ago when the PFI was signed. The largest transport scheme will see the next phase of the Eastern Road cycle corridor delivered, ending a black spot which cyclists have long campaigned to see addressed. Additional monies are proposed to help deliver the important arts and enhancement works along our new sea defences in Southsea. The new link officer between PCC and coastal partners is already working on a number of proposals which will see both local and national artists and creatives bring forward improvements that will ensure that we will not only have world-class sea defences protecting local homes and businesses, but points of interest to engage local residents and visitors alike as they enjoy our new promenade. Finally, we have instructed that an asset management strategy be developed to ensure that we are making the right decisions around where to target future capital resources, investing in our assets, which we hold in trust for the people of Portsmouth. Projects already in receipt of funding, such as City Centre North scheme, continue to progress, having received outline planning permission earlier in the municipal year, and despite the Prime Minister's hugely unhelpful U-turn over recycling, which has ultimately delayed the introduction of doorstep glass and plastics recycling, we continue to work with our partner local authorities to agree on the scope for a new recycling centre to ensure that we can bring these streams online as soon as possible to add to the successful food waste rollout already funded by this administration. And so, Lord Mayor, I hope it is clear that this administration is prioritising the renewal and preservation of the assets which our communities value, seeking to do even better at protecting the most vulnerable in our city, investing in quality leisure facilities, play parks for families and outside spaces for all, improving transport options for all road users and helping to keep our communities safe, investing in local schools and protecting our museums. This is a capital budget that invests in the future of our city with residents at its heart. Now, I would like to thank the Portsmouth Independents and the Labour Group for reaching out to me ahead of this meeting to discuss their priorities and for offering to work collegiately to agree a budget that they feel able to support. The Labour Group have asked for additional funding for CCTV and road safety, and I am able to confirm that both can be accommodated. If this budget is approved, then we'll use our delegations to move £25,000 from the sea defence enhancements to provide for additional CCTV cameras and allocate an additional £100,000 from the future LTP4 provision to road safety measures. Any specific schemes requested will be considered under the Council's existing priority assessment process. They also raised concerns that the funding for the Stroke Association would end in December and asked if it could be extended to the end of the financial year. I was able to confirm that we had already made provision for this, as we agree that it is important to maintain this service while we continue the long wait for the ICP to develop its stroke pathway. Alongside this, we've been working with the Stroke Association, who will propose a new model for us to consider, and we are very happy to continue to work cross-party to make sure that this happens. The Independent Group requested a number of traffic feasibility studies for road safety improvements, and I understand that they have received confirmation that these are now added to the programme and will, as for the Labour Group's request, be subject to the agreed Council priority assessment processes. I have further agreed to support funding for exercise equipment in Paulsgrove and Copner, a community safety fund open to all councillors to support community-led initiatives such as neighbourhood watch schemes, improvements to the dog kennels via the new CCTV, as I've already mentioned, some minor seating improvements at Port Solent Field, and enhancement of Gatcombe Park as part of business as usual for the Parks team. These requests are also covered within the budget as presented. There have been significant progress this municipal year in developing cross-party working on a range of key issues, not least Tipner West and the future of the civic offices. As a minority administration, it's important that in the best interest of the city, we're working collegiately in agreeing the direction of travel on such things that will not come to fruition immediately and will have a big long-term impact to give officers and the public confidence that we are able to set aside party interests whenever we can. In conclusion, I want to highlight two areas which have also been incorporated into the budget. Firstly, it is anticipated that Portsmouth will once again be the national focus for commemorations for D-Day, this time for the 80th anniversary. We should also recognise the success of Portsmouth Pride in securing UK City of Pride status for 2025. There is a financial allocation within the overall budget to ensure that both of these significant events are able to be financially supported by the Council. My Lord Mayor, this is a budget which protects the Council's finances, preserves vital local services and invests in the future of our communities and our city, and I commend it to full Council.
Thank you, Leader. Do I have a seconder?
More than happy to second, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I'll now call upon the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Bosher, to respond. Any amendments will need to be proposed and seconded and then given to me in writing before the amendment is discussed further or put to the meeting. There we go. Do you have a seconder?
Happy to second.
Would you like to wait for that to be circulated? Councillor Bosher.
He's just throwing them all over the place. I was going to say, I do not appear to be lit up just yet, Lord Mayor. Okay, no. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I stand here to propose the Conservative Group financial proposals for the financial period covering 1st of April 2024 to the 31st of March 2025. Lord Mayor, going back, and the Leader touched on it, on the 24th of February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, and this abhorrent act of aggression has caused tens of thousands of deaths and instigated Europe's largest refugee crisis since World War II. Both Ukraine and Russia are two of the major suppliers of energy and food and fertiliser commodities, and this brutal invasion has caused disruptions in supply chain and raised prices for these commodities in both developed and developing countries. As we cross the second anniversary of the invasion, the economic consequences are still being affected across the world. And although inflation here in the UK was over 10% at this time last year, it's projected to fall to 2% following strong work from our Conservative government. In France, inflation is predicted to be 3.4% and 3.1% in Germany. The impact of interest rate instability hangover over the past 2 years are still being felt here in Portsmouth. And today I'm going to formally propose on behalf of the Conservative Party our plans for 2024-25. Lord Mayor, a 4.99% increase in council tax is not what we would need, and as a Conservative group, this is not what we would have done. However, with the backdrop of the war in Ukraine and other pressures and the requirements to spend an additional £14.5 million in children's services and adult social care, we face difficult times. The budgetary pressures that have been outlined by the Section 151 officer have deemed that increase necessary. But I'm looking to the Leader and his Cabinet to take note of the pressures being placed on our communities and to ensure that we have tight financial controls in the coming financial year. Looking to the administration budget and the capital budget, I will single out a few schemes. As the Leader has already mentioned, 380,000 for early years demand, 7.5 million for secondary and special school places, both of which, as he's pointed out, are government money passported directly to PCC. for which I would acknowledge the role that Penny Mordaunt has played in securing this funding. Indeed, Penny has been instrumental in a number of grants for Portsmouth from the Youth Investment Fund, 11,500 for Hilsey and Wimmering Centre, which I gather Councillor Madgwick is completely supportive of, 18,000 for the 70th Portsmouth Scout Group, and 1.4 million for King George V playing fields, being 3 examples. And since Penny's Dental Summit, we now have 3 new dental practices in the north of the city. In Penny, we have an MP who delivers for Portsmouth, doesn't write letters. Now, to pick on a few bits and pieces within the capital budget, climate change and greening the city highlights a further £100,000 investment again. This is a scheme that we welcome. However, the same amount was put forward by the Lib Dem administration last year, and so far only 70,000 of that has been spent. Last year, it was labelled as a doubling the tree canopy. My assumption last year was that we'd be spending that £100,000 on tree planting, which wasn't quite the case according to the former leader. It was also about letting the trees grow bigger, I seem to recollect, he said. But interestingly, the administration spent more last year on concreting over grass verges in Paulsgrove than it did on greening the city. Looking to outside court improvements and play area improvements, of the £920,000, almost 50% of that is being spent on Brandsbury Park, and well over 60% of these budgets being spent in the south of the city. Local elections on the horizon, perhaps? We've not even got to Brandsbury Leisure Centre yet, Lord Mayor. But Brandsbury Leisure Centre, Lord Mayor, this project has now risen from 16 million to 22 million, and we're now hearing that the sports hall facility is being taken out of that. Hopefully now, though, we have a fully funded scheme. But so far, the cost of this scheme has eclipsed the total cost of the Mountbatten Centre redevelopment, with its 50-metre pool, gym facilities, splash pool, cafeteria, changing facilities, by several million, and to date, not a shovel in the ground. Within the housing and homelessness, the administration is seeking to create a central hub and reception facilities to the tune of £352,000. This is a £352,000 concept. It's not fully costed, and is the estimated capital for a fit-out space, I understand, within the civic offices, most likely on the ground floor. In my lifetime on the Council, Lord Mayor, the ground floor has been fitted out at least 4 times, to my knowledge. But unfortunately, Lord Mayor, this Lib Dem administration has form when it comes to schemes not fully costed. This year, we have Brandsbury Park Leisure Centre, the new ground floor reception facilities. Last year, we had £500,000 for the purchase of Farlington playing fields, which weren't actually Farlington playing fields and wasn't successful, not even close. And then who can forget the St James Hospital pantomime? Moving on to resources now, Lord Mayor, and this one is a classic. £472,800 allocated for the Civic Office downsizing scheme, and the clue here is in the description, a review into downsizing the civic offices. So what this £472,000 is actually for is to carry out a review and come up with a study. But when you break down the costs of it, £204,000 for that is for business analyst consultants and feasibility studies. £182,000 of that is for project management staff. Now, you think staff in big numbers, that's just 2.5 posts. That's £73,000 per post that we're planning to do. And there's a further £58,000 in there for media and comms. That's an awful lot of money on consultants, media and comms for a feasibility study, Lord Mayor. So much for the Lib Dems' promise to cut back on consultants. For our part, Lord Mayor, we've looked to support our local communities, particularly those in the often overlooked areas, Cotner, Hilsey, Drayton and Farlington and Cossam, which have traditionally been ignored by the Lib Dem administration in the scramble for votes in Southsea. We've held public meetings, we've listened to residents who are fearful of speeding traffic in Copner and Hilsey. Those residents want safer streets, not £500,000 worth of studies and reviews. So we've looked to put money into those communities to meet with their concerns at a local level. Cotham High Street is often ignored by the Liberal Democrats. There's no votes there, so let's not bother. Cotham High Street is a key local shopping district in the north of the city. So we're proposing a fund to enhance the public realm, make it more attractive for local shoppers to come and to protect those businesses that are already there. ANPR cameras around our schools, something that Conservatives introduced under my watch. These have proved extremely successful in making the areas around our schools significantly more safer. We're proposing additional monies into that to actually reinforce that, to make life easier for our parents and our children to be able to walk to school in safety. Another area of concern that we are regularly picking up on are pavements. Broken, damaged, poor disability access. They're all regular concerns that we hear time and time again, Lord Mayor. We're proposing a dedicated fund to address those concerns. The PFI contract is coming to an end, and we must seek to make accessibility for pedestrians safe. That's why we are proposing the fund, which will be citywide availability. Let's look to make accessibility for all of our residents, irrespective of their physical ability to be able to move around our city safely. Our amendment, Lord Mayor, is a listening amendment. It seeks to take on the views of our residents and support them in their aspirations to improve their local communities. And finally, Lord Mayor, a massive thank you to all the staff who supported councillors of all parties in the excellent job they do, and in particular my thanks to Chris Ward and his team for supporting creating our budget amendment. Lord Mayor, I commend the Conservative budget amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bosher. I will now call the leader of the Labour Group, Councillor Gerarda, to respond. Any amendments will need to be proposed and seconded. They're given to me in writing before the amendment is discussed further or put to the meeting. Councillor Gerarda. Oh, and welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's nice to be back. Thank you, my Lord Mayor. This year's budget can be summed up in 5 words. Pay more, but get less. Council tax is set to rise again in Portsmouth, putting even more pressure on working people. But residents won't be getting more. The proposed increase of 4.99% will simply help the authority keep its head above water. It will help with keeping up with rising demands on social services, schools and homelessness services. Meanwhile, the council needs to make cuts of £2 million to balance the budget, making this yet another challenging year financially for Portsmouth. The cost of living crisis and inflation are 2 of the main drivers of the increased pressure on frontline services. The more financial pressures on families means more chances they'll no longer be able to afford their rent, mortgage or bills. It puts residents at increased risk of homelessness, family breakdown and illness. This creates a double whammy for the council, with more demand for council services when inflation is already pushing up the council's ongoing costs. My Lord Mayor, my heart breaks every time I speak to residents who simply cannot afford to make ends meet anymore. Such as one resident who's a single mum with 3 young children, who's living in cramped and squalid conditions and can't even afford to rent that property. She's been suicidal as a result and has lost all hope. Or an elderly widow who has terrible arthritis, but she can't afford to keep her heating on for long enough, so she's in a constant state of pain. Or the gentleman who lost his job because his company couldn't keep up with the financial pressures, and he'd lost his sense of pride because he's now reliant on food banks. My Lord Mayor, there's currently so much suffering in our city, and yet it's needless because the cost of living crisis is largely man-made and avoidable. Responsibility for this sits squarely with this outdated Conservative government, which insists on clinging on to power, when what the public really want is a general election now, so they can vote with their feet and put the Conservatives where they belong, in the past. While wider global forces have contributed to the economic challenges we face as a country, it was exacerbated by the fallout of the disastrous Truss mini-budget in 2022. Remember that? As a direct result, there's been additional pressure on households with sharp and unexpected increases of interest rates, which now means many face affordable mortgage payments, increases of hundreds of pounds a month, and the threat of losing their homes. Conservative economic mismanagement has so much to answer for, especially for our residents here in Portsmouth. That's why another increase to council tax is going to be another blow for residents. And while the Conservatives will have you believe they're a party of tax cuts, they're actually a government overseeing considerable tax rises. New analysis by Labour reveals the council tax bill is set to top 57 billion under the Conservatives. That's more than double than under the last Labour government. Isn't it ironic that the government is forcing councils to raise council tax while they talk about plans to reduce tax in the forthcoming budget? Doing what they can nationally to secure as many votes as possible, while locally, cash-strapped councils increase tax out of necessity. This is double standards and hypocrisy. As outlined in the budget report, since 2011-12, the council will have made £108 million in savings. This is 49% of its controllable spend. This is eye-watering and just illustrates the chronic underfunding councils like ours have experienced. This means less funds to invest in our city, less funds to tackle the climate crisis, and less funds for future generations. This is wasted time, hope, and opportunity. As a Labour group, to our Liberal Democrat colleagues, we do have to point this out. A lot of the root cause does come from the Lib Dem Tory coalition of 2010. We have to remind everyone because it's an obvious example of cause and effect. Because of this coalition, austerity measures were introduced, leading to cuts to the NHS, police services, and council funding, among many other things. The pain we are feeling now and the pressure our public services are under is a direct result of that coalition. Looking forward to the Portsmouth City Council budget today, the leader of the council was willing to consider Labour's policy proposals. These were based on feedback from residents on the ground, as well as the most recent Big Portsmouth survey. This found residents' most wanted investment in health and care services, community safety and regeneration. That's why Labour asked for three main things: £100,000 more for road safety measures, £16,000 to extend the Portsmouth Stroke Recovery Service until the end of the financial year, and double the number of deployable CCTV cameras. I'm pleased to say the leader of the council agreed to accept these ideas, and I thank him for including them in the budget today. We do have an amendment that we were ready to propose from the floor if the leader didn't stick to his word, but he did. So I'm pleased to say we don't need to put it forward. In many parts of our city, traffic, rat running and speeding vehicles are compromising road safety. This makes our city a less desirable place to live, increases pollution, and it poses serious health and safety risks, especially for the most vulnerable, like children or older people. There will now be £500,000 worth of funding available for the worst affected areas based on evidence and resident feedback. With the Portsmouth Stroke Recovery Service, which the Labour Group, Stroke Survivors and Stephen Morgan MP have been campaigning to save, we wanted to secure funding for the service beyond the end of 2024. At present, the contract will expire before the end of the financial year, meaning the service will be facing a cliff edge before alternative provision is made. While the local integrated care board is meant to be funding the service in the long term, there's no plans for this at present. So we really must do all we can to ensure stroke survivors get the support they desperately need. We would like to see this crucial service funded for longer, and we will be keeping pressure up depending on the outcome of the ICB. With our proposals to double the number of CCTV, we ask for this because fly tipping and antisocial behaviour are two of the top issues facing our city. We need to do all we can to help residents feel pride in their streets and in our city once again. Beyond these proposals, we are pleased to see other things in the budgets that we have been campaigning for, such as securing shore power to the port, increasing tree canopy cover, and increased funding for Portsmouth Pride. We do have another request that ideally the budgeting process does start earlier, giving other parties the time to contribute ideas and scrutinise plans. That's so we're not left scrambling with a couple of weeks to digest the budget in difficult economic circumstances. More time and collaboration would lead to a better budget. My Lord Mayor, Labour in Power offers solutions to solve people's problems. In our own city, the publicly owned port that makes £6 million profit for frontline services each year is a legacy of Labour running the council in Portsmouth. Nationally, Labour's last time in government saw the lowest waiting times for the NHS. For the forthcoming general election, Labour is committed to reinvesting in the NHS again, promising thousands more GP and dentist appointments and a dramatic decrease in existing waiting times for services. These are just some of the transformational things that Labour has and will achieve, and it's what drives us as Labour councillors to want to make Portsmouth an even safer, greener and fairer city for all. Lastly, I want to put on record our group's thanks to council officers, in particular Chris Ward and his team, for everything they've done on getting the budget secured for today. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dorada. So just to confirm, you're not putting an amendment forward today. Thank you. So next up, I will call the leader of the Portsmouth Independence Party Group, Councillor George Madrick, to respond. And again, any amendments will need to be proposed and seconded, then given to me in writing before the amendment is discussed further or put to the meeting. Councillor Madrick.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Like every budget so far, I'm not going to do a speech, and I wasn't actually going to say anything at all. We're not doing an amendment. As you know, we try and be proactive early on in the process, and I thank the leader for opening up those discussions back in December, and similarly the year before with Councillor Vernon Jackson. I think, you know, the council is stuck between a rock and a hard place, as always, with finances. Nothing's going to be perfect, and I really did appreciate last year when all four parties come together and put through a budget. I thought that was a really positive thing, and it seems like we're almost here today as well with a few, and I think that the Tory amendment is reasonable. I think one thing I will say though, which is I wasn't actually going to say anything, but I'll put a pound in the jar for that. But this is a local budget and a local council, and I've just sat here and listened to a load of national politics or general election stuff. You know, this is a local council budget. I understand that things that happen from a national level and from a government level do have an impact on local budgets. I understand that, I get it. But we should be talking purely about local issues and focusing on local agenda. And I don't think that as much as Penny does a good job, and I think Stephen does a really good job as well in the south, I don't think it's relevant to poking at each other in this chamber over a local budget. So, as I say, I'm not going to sit here and criticise a Liberal Democrat administration like I wouldn't criticise a Conservative or Labour administration during these tough times. It's not relevant. I think we just got to be reasonable, and hopefully we can get a budget through that's reasonable, that everybody's happy with. And I think that this budget does put local residents at the forefront. I think that the Conservative amendment does put residents at the forefront of their decisions. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Madrick, for your appropriately long speech. The rest of you take note. I will now call upon the leader of the Portsmouth Community Independence Group, Councillor Cal Corkery, to respond. Again, any amendments will need to be proposed and seconded, then given to me in writing before the amendment is discussed further or put to the meeting. Councillor Corkery.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and good afternoon, members. No amendment from us, you'll all be glad to hear, and probably not too much of a long speech either. Just a few notes, I guess, and reflections on the contents of the budget and the prospects for the finances of the local authority going forward. Firstly, we just wanted to pick up on the information that was contained with regards to the budget consultation that's taken place. I think really interesting to note those priorities that are picked out by members of the public who engaged in that process, and just how much of a really high priority they placed on, in particular, on health and social care, and also community safety issues also right up there. Very much reflections of what we're hearing on the ground as the top priorities for our residents in Charles Dickens ward and indeed across the city. As you know, we, and kind of in particular Councillor Mellor, does a lot of campaigning and spends a lot of time campaigning on issues around community safety, in particular violence against women and girls. So really important to kind of emphasise that that is also a priority of residents and something we must all ensure that we're working towards eliminating as much as possible. Just moving on to the contents of the budget papers today, starting off with the capital programme. A few things, I guess, just to highlight and reflect on before we kind of proceed to hear the rest of the debate and indeed vote on the budget as a whole. Firstly, as has already been noted, I think we do need to look at what's happening with the Bransby Park leisure centre proposals. I mean, it seems that politically there's probably kind of consensus now that will happen, but I still think that we need to as councillors, and indeed those of us who are backbench councillors, play a role there in kind of assurance and scrutiny around ensuring that we are getting value for money and that those costs are being controlled. Because we know that over the course of this project, in fact, I think Councillor Bosch, I will correct you, because I think the original figure that we had before us in terms of full council wasn't £17 million, it was £12.5 million. And it's now gone up, obviously, quite considerably, some 70%, just shy of 70%. Now, I know inflation is high, I know construction costs are going up, and it may well be that that does represent value for money, and that is what a new leisure centre costs in this day and age. But I just think that we need to provide that scrutiny and get that really assurance from the administration that what is currently proposed, the level of funding that is currently being drawn on from council reserves, is an appropriate use of council resources, does represent value for money. And I think also what I would like to see is an assurance around the level of risk around those financial forecasts, because in the last couple of budgets we've been told this is how much Brandsbury Leisure Centre will cost. Next year we're back another couple of million. Next year we're back, I think this year, another 5 million. So will we be in the same position this time next year, asking for more draw on council resources for something which we had hoped had already been resolved in previous years? So yeah, I guess really a request for kind of that assurance around those figures. Moving on, I did want to talk a little bit about the information that's contained in here with regards to, well, I think there's two issues here. The one is the homeless day service, and one is the new hub for housing options as it used to be known. Firstly, the Housing Options Hub, I think there will be no qualms for me on that. I think anyone who has visited Housing Options, as I will continue to call it, because I think H&S is confusing and lots of people know it by Housing Options still, so I will continue to use that name, apologies. Anyone who has visited that service in person, we've been there quite a few times supporting residents, particularly vulnerable residents who may struggle to engage on their own, quite often go along there to ensure that people are kind of supported through the process and get access to the help they need. Will know that that facility is not fit for purpose. It's obviously, I'm assuming, was built when the Civic Officers was built, and not much investment has been put into it ever since. People are working very hard and doing as best job as they can, but I think the physical facilities are letting them down. I mean, a really obvious example that, again, we have highlighted over the years and is now hopefully going to be addressed, is the fact that when you go in there, you are forced to sit in quite a small waiting area with lots of other people who are quite often going through crisis, one of the most difficult experiences of their lives. They then have to go up to the desk, which is about a metre from where everyone else sits, and explain in detail exactly what's happening to them before they can go into a private room, which aren't very well soundproofed anyway, and explain it all again. So absolutely, we need a new facility there, and hopefully that will address all those issues. I would like to press a little bit more, though, on the homelessness day service, because I remember 2 years ago when we were all told with a fanfare, and I think a few of us went to the opening of it, the current homelessness day service. This was, I think, September 2021, and we were told at that time the council has spent this money on developing this space, investing in this space, and it's the new all singing, all dancing homelessness day service that will continue to serve for many years to come. So I'm curious about why less than 3 years down the line we are now in a position around that service no longer being fit for purpose, and indeed another couple £100 grand draw on council resources to provide an alternative. Now, the cynic in me would say perhaps this is not necessarily about the service, but about its location, and that location has been deemed unfit because local residents, businesses perhaps don't like having lots of rough sleepers and vulnerable people in their area, which ironically, I think was one of the reasons it was moved there in the first place, because I remember election leaflets in 2021 which proclaimed, good news, just before local elections, we've got agreement from the council to move the current homelessness day service from Baffins, where it should never be there, to another part of the city. And funny enough, again this year, I've seen the same thing on leaflets around the Elm Grove area, which say, good news, we've managed to get the homelessness day service moved to another part of the city. Is it just going to keep getting kicked around like political football? I hope not. So again, any kind of reassurance, and I'm sure Councillor Sanders will respond to those points and the content of his leaflets back in 2021, so it would be useful to hear that going forwards. What I will say, almost to contradict that point, but I do think the current homelessness day service isn't a great physical space either, because it was about a tenth of the size of the previous provision. So again, why was that money invested? Why was that decision taken in the first place? Has probably several £100,000, if we're honest, just been wasted? And if so, who is being held to account for that and who is responsible? Keeping on the capital budget, the critical buildings maintenance, we're talking about £2.5 million, and a lot of that is going to be essential repairs works just to keep the lights on, so to speak. Clearly money that needs to be spent, but I think it's also important there that that is done in relation to the alternative work or the kind of complementary work that's also contained within the budget around the asset management strategy, so that we have got a long-term plan around how estates are being managed and that we're not just pouring money into buildings that are perhaps aren't fit for purpose, that do need to be replaced, and that we're thinking long term about how we can invest in public facilities that will be there for the future generations to come. Moving on from the capital budget, just a few reflections on other parts within here. Clearly, one of the big decisions we're taking today is around the level of council tax. The proposal is for that to be maxed out so that people are paying significant amounts more in council tax next year and in future years than they have been in this year. And we all understand why, because public finances are stretched, the finances of this council are stretched. There are lots of things that we want to be spending money on that the money isn't there for at the moment. So it's understandable to seek that level of increase. However, what I would like to remind people is that lots of people are struggling to pay the council tax levels as they are. If those council tax levels increase, then that financial hardship and suffering will also increase. I think what we do need to go back and do is revisit how we support people who are experiencing financial hardship and may fall into arrears with their council tax. Councillors may remember that we brought a motion to this chamber last year, and I think we tried to bring it about 3 or 4 times before, on that topic, asking for Cabinet to take some really concrete actions to ensure that the way in which supporting people, we are supporting people who fall into financial arrears with their council tax and other council debts is being done in best practice in the industry, and in particular with regards to how those debts are being managed and passed out to third-party bailiffs for collection. We know and we continue to hear stories of people who are being harassed, there's no other way to put it, by bailiffs acting on behalf of this local authority and when they are already struggling to get by. I think no one will oppose millionaires or people who've got plenty of money in the bank who are choosing not to pay their council tax. Absolutely, throw the book at them, chase them down, ensure that they are being held to account. But there are lots and lots of people, lots of them live in our area, lots of them live in other parts of the city, who just can't afford to pay and are still being harangued by people knocking on the door. Every time there's a knock on the door, it's an extra charge on their bill, and they're just spiralling and spiralling out of control. So I still think this is an issue that needs to be addressed. I don't know if there has been any update, any action taken on that council motion since it was submitted to full council and passed last year. But again, any update would be gratefully received, whether here today or outside of this meeting. In terms of social care funding, clearly that's one of the most significant parts of the budget today, an uprate in the budgets for both adults and children's social care to try and address the issues that are being seen across the country as well as in Portsmouth with regards to overspend and increased pressure on those services and the need to meet those needs of vulnerable people. We're absolutely supportive of doing everything we can to try and ensure those services are fairly funded and financed in a sustainable long-term way. Also worth noting, again, a topic that has been before this council chamber many times, the topic of the living wage, particularly of relevance to social care, because the big chunk of people within the council supply chain who don't receive the real living wage are people that are working in adult social care services. They might not be working directly for this local authority, they're quite often working for small businesses, sometimes small charities, who are they're struggling to get by. They're doing some of the most important work in this city, supporting the most vulnerable people, trying to enable people to still live independently, often in their own homes, but also sometimes in residential care settings. But they're not even receiving the very basic of what has been defined as the real living wage. So again, something to consider, something always to keep at the forefront of our minds when we're talking about council finances, that we do need to think about how people are being paid, about the conditions they're being asked to work in, and that we get a fair deal for working people, particularly those who are providing really important public services. Just before I conclude, just a few reflections on the indicative budget savings. I think that clearly there's some stuff in there that is going to have very little direct impact on public services and the people that receive them, things like contract negotiations, other kind of routine efficiencies are to be welcomed. But I do think it's worth noting that that isn't everything that's contained within the indicative budget savings. There are some which I wouldn't describe as kind of free hits, if you like, something that's a couple of things which are going to directly impact on people. There's a line in here for the removal of a vacant independent reviewing officer post. Now, my understanding of that role is it's people who will go out independent from local authority and review placements of vulnerable young people who have been placed in care or foster placements to ensure that they're safe and that their needs are being met. So clearly, there's a question there around whether removing those positions is going to ensure that those services can still be provided in a safe way. And also putting up adult social care fees for clients in residential placements. That again is going to have a knock-on impact on people's finances, people who are often already struggling to meet the fees within their service. The relevant cabinet member is shaking his head, so perhaps he thinks it won't have an impact on people, so it'd be useful to hear that explanation. But again, something that's worth drawing out from the budget papers. Looking forward to the future of council finances, I hope there's a time that we can all sit here and we're not talking about savings, we're not talking about how cash-strapped the local authority is, because there's a fair financial settlement from government which allows local authorities to meet the needs of its residents. And hopefully, if we're optimistic about things, that national policy picture could change in a not too distant future. I'm sorry to talk about a general election, George, but there is likely to be one fairly soon, and it will have an impact on us. Even if we want to focus on our local issues, you can't extract ourselves completely from the national policy picture. I guess the question is, what will that national policy picture be? I mean, I certainly hope it will be better. I don't think it could be much worse at all from my perspective. But how will it be better is my question, I guess. I haven't seen much in terms of detail in terms of local government finances. I don't think there is much at the moment. And indeed, a lot of the mood music is that there is no money to spread round. I think there is money out there. It's in certain people's pockets and in certain people's properties, and actually if we tax that, maybe we could put a little bit more into local government finances, amongst other things. But then maybe that's a message for Keir Starmer that some people can relay back, probably outside of our remit. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, full council, for your time, and yeah, I look forward to the rest of the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Corkery. Members, are there any further amendments to be tabled at this point? Councillor Atkins.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Just before I table an amendment, can I seek a clarification on the standing orders under Rule 45? If I table an amendment which falls, which is ruled out by the Finance Officer, can I then table an alternative amendment on the basis that one was not moved?
We'll find out. 1 second.
It's Standing Order 45 indicates that you can move and second one amendment only, irrespective of whether it falls.
But if I'm not permitted to move an amendment, have I moved it, is what I'm asking. At what point will the Section 151, if the Section 151 also has a problem with an amendment, at what point in the process does he rule the amendment out? Because if he rules it before I've moved it, then I haven't moved an amendment.
Give us a minute, everyone. Just talk among yourselves for a second. Smoke if you got them. Ladies and gentlemen, members, please. Ladies and gentlemen. Everyone ready? I'll hand over to, no, hang on. It was all going too well. Come on, I've got a fundraiser to get to.
Is that tomorrow?
I'm leaving before 6 o'clock. I think if you're not finished, it's tough. Councillor Atkins.
But could you make the ruling on the record in relation to my query? Yes, thank you. And I will have an amendment. I'll be moving after that. Yes.
Lord Mayor, I'm sorry to point this out. I do hope the officers are not negotiating with Councillor Atkins, but telling him what the situation is.
I believe that they're explaining the situation to him directly before we announce it on record. Ready?
As far as Standing Order 45 is concerned, you have the opportunity of putting forward one amendment.
Would you like to put forward an amendment?
I'd like to put forward an amendment, yes, Lord Mayor. I believe it's just being prepared for signature. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder?
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
And once it's been prepared for signature, would you like it to be circulated?
Yes.
Should we have an adjournment while that's being prepared? It says adjournment on here. I think we could all use a comfort break, and I am slowly cooking under all these robes. So, 10 minutes. So we'll be back at. I'm not giving you 20 minutes. You can have 10 minutes. I'll give you 15. Back at 5:02. please be seated. Straight to asking. Councillor Atkins, do you wish to speak to your amendment?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. As I begin now, I'll actually briefly summarise what would have been put in the other amendment, which I was not allowed to put, which is, as I said to the Council in December, I wished the administration to identify some form of budget where they would avoid raising council tax by the full amount. Of course, they didn't and have continued to call doing so irresponsible, impossible, and all kinds of other names during the course of this meeting. The fact remains that since 2018, which I think is the relevant date when the Liberal Democrats took control of this council, council tax has increased by nearly 25%. And if the track is followed in this budget of increasing it by 5% every year between now and 2028, it will represent a near 45% increase on the 2018 level of council tax. So that will be a record of 10 years, 45% increase in council tax, and I just simply do not believe that was justified. And so at the last minute I tried to put together an amendment which would have not made the 3% general fund increase in council tax. It would have made the 2% for passport into social care, but it would not have made the other 3%. I did not identify sufficient savings because of a disagreement with the Chief Finance Officer, to whom I defer, over whether or not this council is actually making savings when the budget is in fact going up. So what I would have done is reduced the inflationary increase that you were making across all portfolios by half.
Councillor Atkins, could you please stick to the amendment that's been tabled?
Well, isn't this my general speech on the budget as well, Lord Mayor? No? No, so I will get another speech apart from this.
You just get 6 minutes to speak on your
Then I'm
amendment.
speaking on the budget as a whole as part of the budget
Party
debate.
leaders get unlimited time.
Yes, I
making
know.
an amendment.
Therefore, this is my budget speech, my whole speech in the budget debate, and I'm contributing to the budget debate.
But you get your 6 minutes to speak on your amendment. That's how it is in the standing
Will I get
orders.
another 6 minutes in the budget debate?
Do
No.
not believe
Therefore,
so.
I can speak on any matter relating to the budget during this 6 minutes. And by the way, it should not include this interruption, which has been over a minute now.
Carry on.
So, thank you, Lord Mayor. As I say, I would not have made the general fund increase, and I would have reduced the increase we are giving to adult social care by about 1 million and the children's social care by about $500,000, representing less than 1% of the children's social care budget and about 1.5% of the adult social care budget. And in doing so, I would have avoided only a £2.8 million out of the, what I calculate to be £17 million this council's budget is going up. What is actually stated in the Finance Officer's report is a £20 million increase in the budget this year. So my point was simply this, that at a time when the residents of Portsmouth are tightening their belt, I don't believe it is right for the council to be fattening its belt. And I understand the inflationary backdrop, I understand the blame my government bears, but as Councillor Madrick said, this is a local budget, and I locally do not believe in 5% council tax increases every year for the next 5 years. Turning now to the budget amendment you have before you, and I wish to simply make the point that it was possible to avoid increasing council tax today. It is a political decision to increase the council's budget while also increasing council tax. And it is a political decision taken by this administration. My actual amendment relates to the Branbury Park swimming pool. And I'm sorry to spoil Councillor Corkery's political consensus, but I think he shares a lot of the same concerns I do. I'm just going a stage further. I should make the point that both of these amendments are personal amendments rather than amendments for the whole Conservative group. But the problem is, Councillor Corkery and members of the Council, that this year is the year that the spending will finally be done. Because up until now, we have spent money planning, preparing, downsizing, recosting, wasting money on Branbury Park Sports Centre. And over the next year, 12 million, as I put it in my precise figure, nearly 13 million pounds from our reserves. So funding that we could spend on other capital projects will be spent on this boondoggle of a swimming pool in Councillor Pitt's ward. We all know why it is in that park, where there is no parking, where there is insufficient space. We all know that as a result, the pool has got to a point where very few people, I think, will actually want to use it, where it's not supported by a sports hall, where it is, a barely adequate sports centre. This was a knee-jerk reaction from the administration on realising they had closed 2 swimming pools across the south of the city without any sensible solution, and it's a bad response. It is a waste of this council's money. I think actually if we look at this hard and carefully, all of us can see this is a waste of this council's money at a time when we don't have a lot of money. What instead we should be doing with the little money we have, with the capital funding we can put together, is we should be thinking about how we regenerate this city, how we really plan for the future. Will a swimming pool in 10 years actually make that much difference to the financial well-being and the residents of Portsmouth citizens outside of Milton? My suggestion is actually what would make far more difference is regenerating commercial roads. And I believe, unlike, I do not believe in many of this council's schemes. I do not believe in Tipner. I do not believe in Bransbury Park. I believe these are wasted money. I believe this administration will never get them off the ground. I do believe in City Centre North. I think it will improve the traffic. It will improve the city centre. It will regenerate the city and spark increased investment in the city. But to get that off the ground, we will need capital funding. And it's not a time when it's easy to raise that in either the private or public sector. So I believe we need to be prudent and put aside funding ourselves. So I would take that 13 million and that will put 12 million of it, the amount that's coming from our reserves, aside, back into a capital reserve investment fund for future investment in the regeneration project we're planning in City Centre North. That I believe is a much better use of the money of Portsmouth people. I think those are simple proposals and I think they're very hard to disagree with.
Thank you, Councillor Atkins.
Lord Mayor.
Thank you. We'll now start the debate. Anyone? No speakers? Councillor Vernon-Jackson.
Well, thank you, my Lord Mayor. This is the first time in 19 years that I have risen to speak at a budget meeting where I've not either been Leader of the Council or Leader of the Opposition. So I'm used to unlimited time, so I'll try to discipline myself. But I think this is a budget that I think I would have been extremely proud to present, and I think Steve's done a really good job in bringing this forward with the help of Susie and all the rest of the group. And also, I think it's right that we record our thanks, as always, to Chris Ward and the team. But I think this is really, really interesting. I think it's a budget that we can be proud of, not just in the administration, but I think actually across all the councillors and the officers who work at Portsmouth City Council. Because I think the difference between what we're seeing here and what we're seeing in other councils is dramatic. If we look to Hampshire County Council, and very good to have Councillor Brent here who will be able to talk about it, Hampshire County Council has put forward a budget that the Daily Mail has deemed as coming from the stingiest council in the country. If even the Daily Mail is turning on the Conservatives in Hampshire, something is clearly a bit nuts. So the proposal in Hampshire is about shutting half the tips in the county, cutting school crossing patrols, turning the street lights off at night, and cutting travel for the disabled. And then we look to Southampton, who are on the edge of declaring bankruptcy, and they've overspent by £11.8 million. They're looking for £30 million of cuts, and they're also turning the street lights off at night. And then you look at the budget that we've got here, and this is something that people across all administrations have worked on. We have a very different budget. We have a budget here without cuts, but with investments. So there's no cuts to services. This is about extra income and about doing things more efficiently. So this is about strong financial control. I have to say, at Southampton, and I look at the SIPFA report into their finances to say that in November, they'd only managed to make 38% of the savings they'd voted for in February. Now, that's terrifying lack of financial control. Now, that just would not be tolerated here. And none of us, from Chris Ward, the Chief Executive, and the Council, none of us would go for that. So I think we've got good, strong financial control here. We've looked at increasing the income. The port's profits of 8 million are really good. We brought Lakeside, and again, our Conservative colleagues, I think, split 4 ways on whether we should buy it. Some yes, some no, some left the room and some abstained. And I think we might see the same again with amendments later today. We got money from commercial rents and from solar panels. So I think this is a budget that we all collectively should be proud of. That we're investing 1.2 million quid in the cycle lane on Eastern Road where there was a fatality to make that bit really safe for people. We're looking at putting money into wheelchair accessible vehicles so that we buy them and rent them to the private hire trade so that there's a better facilities across the city. There's extra street lights in this city going in to make the city safer for women and girls. The contrast with Southampton and Hampshire is dramatic. We're investing in Bransbury Park, in Castle Road. So I think this is a budget we should be really proud of. We've preserved a youth service here in this city, and Hampshire has none. So I think, collectively, we should all be very proud of this. We should give our congratulations both to Steve and the administration and to the office for putting this together, and this is something we should unite behind. Finally, Councillor Atkins' budget amendment is interesting. I have to say, Councillor Atkins, I ask Labour, PIP and the Lib Dems if they will please remove their candidates in Cosham. You, Councillor Atkins, are the gift that keeps on giving. And you have given to us yet again, and I am so grateful for you, for the leaflets you will enable us to print. Your generosity and kindness is great, and we'll be so sorry to see you go. Lord Mayor, I think this is a budget we should all be proud of, and I think we should all collectively be supporting it. Thank you.
I think that's the shortest speech you've ever done, Gerald. Thank you, Councillor Vernon-Jackson. I have no one else indicating to speak, so I will call upon the Leader of the Council to sum up and ask whether he wishes to subsume any of the amendments put. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Let's deal with the obvious thing first. No, we will not be subsuming Councillor Atkins' amendment. I should have actually gone to a betting shop and put some money on it, because I predicted exactly that amendment about a month ago. Because it was blindingly flipping obvious that that's what he was going to do. And anybody who had the misfortune of sitting through Scrutiny Management Panel last week would have probably guessed it as well. And I did actually congratulate Councillor Corkery for his patience afterwards. Regarding the other Conservative amendment, which we're asked to believe is the group amendment, although the one from Councillor Atkins is amendment proposed by the Conservative group. So if that wasn't your intention, you might want to have a word with him. It's a shame, really, because...
Point of order, Lord Mayor. Under 39B.
What standing order?
39B. Clarification of earlier comment. That I can indeed confirm that is a typo, as I confirmed in my speech. These were my own personal amendments, so I should not have put that on top of the paper. I apologise.
Thank you for clarifying. Councillor Pitt.
Well, there we go. It's a bit of a shame with the other amendment. I did say, and I meant it, when I got to my feet in May, when I was elected as leader of the council, that we are a minority administration. It's important that our door is open to conversation. The Labour group came to see me, very happy to sit with them and have a cup of coffee and talk things through. Similarly with PIP. I did... Cal and I were at the same event last week, and I spoke to him. I just wasn't contacted by the Conservative group. So some of the stuff that you're proposing in there are feasibility issues around traffic and transportation and road safety. And there's the same advice that was offered to the Portsmouth Independents and Labour is you can put those forward for consideration. There is absolutely no issue around that at all, but the council does have a policy where proper scoring is done around things to make sure it's fair and to prevent the kind of intervention that would just jump things up the list unfairly. I did suggest that when I was talking to Charlotte and Graham that we probably need to review that list and make sure that it is up to date and something that is still supported by the ward councillors in each area. And I think it would be very sensible and pragmatic to do that, because we've all got priorities in different areas in the city, and we want to make sure that we are spending whatever money that we have actually got on the schemes that are still supported by the ward councillors in that area. And I think that would be a really productive piece of work. It's obviously something that matters to all of us. So whilst I will not be proposing to subsume the Conservative Group amendment, Simon, I'm very happy to have conversations with you on that, and I'm sure Councillor Vernon Jackson is too, because some of the things you're drawing attention to obviously matter to your residents. I'm not going to talk any further about the proposal from Councillor Atkins. There's just a couple of things that I wanted to address that came up from other speakers. I absolutely agree that the time between the publication of the budget papers and this meeting is not enough. We had proposed to leave an extra week and in order to create more time, and then entirely due to the late process from the government in actually confirming all the figures, we had to move the cabinet meeting back a week again, leaving us where we are now. So I would be happy to have discussion with the other group leaders to see if what we actually propose next year is to move this meeting back by a week. We might have a different government process, but we can't rely on it. But if we were to go a week later, we would have some chance of giving ourselves a bit more time to discuss things rationally. So I think it's a good suggestion. I'm very happy to look at that. Other thing, I did want to clarify something. It's fascinating to know that Penny may have worked behind the scenes around the Youth Investment Fund to bring that money into the city. But I did check, and when I saw quotes from both members of Parliament in the paper, as far as I'm aware, there wasn't even a letter of support around that bid. They weren't engaged with it at all. So if those communications did go on, they're very welcome. But it was certainly news to me on the, here in the chamber today that was even a thing. It was something that was brought through by quite a big board of officers, with Councillor Horton and myself working with them to develop that proposal. And it is a very welcome investment into the city. Councillor Corkery raised some good points around the process with Bransbury Partner scrutiny around it. There have been quite a lot of reports that have come through to the Cultural, Leisure and Economic Development portfolio on that. David Moorman, the lead officer on it, has been there. He's asked questions and provided answers. Another update is due. I think it's very clear that we had to wait to get this bit of the process out of the way before we could confirm the final position. But of course, that scrutiny needs to happen, and it is absolutely essential that we get value for money. I did just want to touch on a couple of things that was talked about earlier on by a couple of people around the cost of these things. And I'm minded to just mention that the Southampton Daily Echo ran a story on the 11th of February, just a couple of days ago, highlighting the fact that it's been necessary for Southampton Council to de-scope their new sports centre. The proposed ski lodge will now be a single-storey building following the decision to delete 2 party rooms and a storage area. Other changes mean the new athletics building will be reduced in size and the grandstand will no longer include a box for officials. And a report to Cabinet members said the cost hike was due to market fluctuations in the construction industry. Now, I read that and I thought, I absolutely get that, because that's exactly the same as is happening here. So I understand why they're making those adjustments, Lord Mayor, and it's not just Southampton either. West Suffolk, Newcastle, Kirklees and Rossendale have also all either de-scoped or cancelled leisure centre projects in the last year. So this is happening all across the country. The Local Government Chronicle reports that in the last 2 years, since the previous funding envelope was confirmed by this council, the cost of building a new leisure centre is now up to 30% more when plans would have been envisaged initially, an expert has told LGC, with the sector now in crisis. So it's in crisis. Around the country, schemes are being de-scoped or councils, but not in Portsmouth. We've made a promise to deliver new swimming pools in the south of the city, not just for Milton Ward. Bransbury Park is the location. It will serve Eastleigh and Craneswater. It will serve Baffins. It will serve Central Southsea Ward, and anyone else who wants to use active travel to be able to get to that centre. And we know from all of the surveys and investigations we've done that that's what people are telling us that they will do. They will use the bus route, they will use scooters, they will use bikes, or they will walk from the locale in order to use it, because Ravelin Park also has a community use agreement, Charter Academy also has a community use agreement, and Mountbatten Centre serves the north of the city. So it's essential that the south and southeast of the city is also served by a pool, not because we say so, but because a nationally renowned consultant who is regarded as the person to go to when you're looking at your leisure provision told us that we needed it. And that was long before Eastney was even closed. The Homeless Prevention Hub, the very idea that we would take money away from that, and I think Councillor Corkery did say very effectively in his speech that money has been spent on the Civic, and I understand that, but we've not got it right yet around the increasing demand that's coming in from people who are finding themselves at risk of their tenancy ending. I've lost count of how many cases I've dealt with from really desperate mums, single mums in some cases, who have got children with special educational needs, who are settled in particular schools, who are losing their tenancy through Section 21 notices and finding themselves in desperate situations. I've had to sit there and listen to people, very similar to what Councillor Corkery said, in tears because of their situation, and creating an environment where we can properly meet with those people, support them properly, is absolutely crucial, and I'm proud that we are going to be doing that today. Why are we moving the day service? Because it's co-location with high needs temporary accommodation for those with addiction and other issues is causing huge problems. We are getting more and more people who are presenting to the Homeless Day Service who never thought they'd be in that position. They're not used to having to deal with local authorities at all and are suddenly finding themselves out in the street. And the co-location of the two, as it's turned out, did not work in the way that it was envisaged that it would, and therefore it's absolutely crucial to move it to a separate dedicated location. The other thing worth noting is that at the moment we're using part of the day service to put people up on beds to sleep on because the sudden spike in demand caused by the government's decision at virtually no notice, a couple of months that's all, to tell people who've been granted the right to remain under the asylum rules and to work in this country 7 days to get out of their temporary accommodation and just leave them hanging. I've had to deal with people who, because they weren't allowed to work, have been volunteering for local charities and having been told that they got the right to remain in this country, then get a letter saying you've got to get out on the street in 7 days. It was such an appalling policy. The government did a U-turn on it just before Christmas, but that caused an enormous spike in demand. So for all of these reasons, it's really important that we address this and make sure that we're dealing with really sensitive situations effectively. The final thing I wanted to touch on, it's not true that the City Council is ignoring Cosham, and I note that investment in there. Councillor Vallely and I and Councillor Shah had a discussion very recently because we want to see electricity provided into the High Street in Cosham to be able to grow the market provision there. I've promised them that we will work with them to support them on that, and that means that they want to bring forward some ward sill, which Councillor Atkins may not agree with, but never mind. We can wait a couple of months. Then we can have that conversation and make sure we're making those improvements. So we are definitely listening. Councillor Atkins, if you'd like to address your comments to the Lord Mayor, that would be greatly appreciated. That's it. I just wanted to touch on those few items. The budget's are there as presented for members to duly consider. Once again, thank you to the other groups for their collaborative approach to doing that in the way that we did this year. And I would remind the Conservative group that the door will remain open should they wish to have similar discussions next year.
Thank you, Councillor Pitt. So we'll move to voting on the amendments. So they'll put to the vote, starting with the official Conservative group amendment, and we'll use the recorded voting method as required by the regulation. So it's a recorded vote. So all those in, would you want to do it? You can do it.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. If those who wish to support the amendment in the name of Councillor Bosher, if you could just please stand and then take your seat once I've called your name. Councillor Dent. Councillor Brian Madgwick. Councillor Emily Strudwick. Councillor George Madgwick. Councillor Russell Simpson. Councillor Ryan Brent. Councillor Atkins. Councillor Smith. Councillor Weems. Councillor Swan. Councillor Gosling. And Councillor Bosher. All those who wish to oppose the amendment in the name of Councillor Bosher, please stand and take your seat once I've read your name. Councillor Corkery. Councillor Mellor. Councillor Candlish. Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Winnington. Councillor Holder. Councillor Madden. Councillor Fazakerley. Councillor Brown. Councillor Oliver. Councillor Barrett. Councillor Ashmore. Councillor Kadir. Councillor Atwell. Councillor Sanders. Councillor Horton. Councillor Vernon Jackson. Councillor Pitt. Councillor Hunt. Councillor Mason. Councillor Shah. Councillor Smythe. Councillor Fielding. Councillor Vallely. Councillor Gerarda. And Councillor Heaney. Any members aside from the Lord Mayor who wish to abstain? Thank you.
So that is lost. 4 was 12 against 26, and I abstained. So that amendment has fallen. So we'll move on to the amendment in Councillor Atkins' name, which will also be recorded vote, and I'll hand over to my able assistant for that.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As before, those who wish to support the amendment in the name of Councillor Atkins, please stand and take your seat once I've read your name. Councillor Ryan Brent. Councillor Matthew Atkins. All those who wish to oppose the amendment in the name of Councillor Atkins, please stand. So, Councillor Corkery, Councillor Mellor, Councillor Candlish, Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Winnington, Councillor Holder, Councillor Madden, Councillor Fazakerley, Councillor Brown, Councillor Oliver, Councillor Barrett, Councillor Ashmore, Councillor Kadir, Councillor Atwell, Councillor Sanders, Councillor Horton, Councillor Vernon Jackson, Councillor Pitt, Councillor Hunt, Councillor Mason, Councillor Shah, Councillor Smythe, Councillor Fielding, Councillor Vallely, Councillor Gerarda, and Councillor Heaney. And all of those who wish to abstain, please stand. Councillor Dent. Councillor Brian Madgwick. Councillor Strudwick. Councillor George Madgwick. Councillor Smith. Councillor Swan. Councillor Weems. Councillor Gosling. Councillor Bosher. And the Lord Mayor. Thank you.
We're just waiting for the results. So that was 4-2 against 26 and 10 abstaining. So that amendment has also fallen. So we will now vote on the Cabinet's recommendations on the budget and council tax, again by recorded vote. Mr. Harris.
Lord Mayor, so we are voting on the Cabinet recommendations as put. All of those who wish to vote in favour, please stand and take your seat again once I've read your name. Councillor Corkery, Councillor Mellor, Councillor Dent, Councillor Brian Madgwick, Councillor Emily Strudwick, Councillor George Madgwick, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Candlish, Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Winnington, Councillor Holder, Councillor Madden, Councillor Fazakerley, Councillor Brown, Councillor Oliver, Councillor Barrett, Councillor Ashmore, Councillor Kadir, Councillor Atwell, Councillor Sanders, Councillor Horton, Councillor Vernon-Jackson, Councillor Pitt, Councillor Hunt, Councillor Mason, Councillor Shah, Councillor Smythe, Councillor Fielding, Councillor Vallely, Councillor Gerarda and Councillor Heaney. All of those who wish to vote against the Cabinet recommendations. Councillor Ryan Brent, Councillor Atkins, Councillor Smith, Councillor Weems, Councillor Swan, Councillor Gosling, Councillor Bowsher. All of those who wish to abstain, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
So 4 is 31, against 7, and I abstained again. So that means the budget has been confirmed and passed. Thank you. That concludes the debate on the budget and council tax, a medium-term budget forecast item. Yay. Just before we go to the questions, I'd just like to thank you all for bearing with me earlier. I've had a really busy few days and I'm extremely tired. So we will move to the final agenda item, item 9, questions from members under Standing Order 17. As advised in the green sheets, there are now 3 questions under Standing Order 17, as question 2 has been withdrawn by Councillor George Madgwick. As you know, there's a total of 45 minutes allocated within standing orders to deal with questions. Can I remind everyone that the member asking the original question may ask up to 2 supplementary questions that must arise directly out of the original question. Any other member is limited to 1 supplementary question that must arise directly out of the original question or its replies. Question 1, Councillor Simpson, to be asked by Councillor Mason. Councillor Simpson.
Oh, I'm going to read out mine, thank you. Given the fact that last November the HMO policy was discussed in the local plan, can the Cabinet member explain why Portsmouth has not been considered for the 5% HMO within a 15-metre radius policy like Thanet District Council? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Mason.
There's a short and a long answer to this question.
I'll do the long one.
You're going to get both.
Oh, hooray.
The short answer... The short...
I'm all ears.
Right. The reason why we have not been considered is because we've never asked. That is the short answer. But if the question